Yes, I hope you are okay wherever you're watching this from. My name is Teacher Ibrahim. This is lesson number 77. In the previous lesson, that is number 76, I was explaining a process called plasmolysis and deplasmolysis. But today, we're going to look at turgor pressure and wall pressure. Before we understand what the meaning of those words are, I would like us to understand an aspect of cell physiology called osmosis, which causes turgor pressure or wall pressure to build up. When the cell has been placed in distilled water, the distilled water becomes a region of low concentration, while inside the cell there is a region of high concentration. Definitely, it is going to absorb some water molecules from that distilled water. As that process continues, were it for the animal cell, such as the red blood cell, it would have bursted. But for the plant cell, it doesn't burst. Have you ever asked yourself, why is it that the plant cell is not bursting when placed in hypotonic solution? While for the animal cells, have you ever asked yourself why those cells burst when placed in hypotonic solution? Good, we are going to understand this in a short while. On the walls of the plant cell, there is a certain compound called cellulose. Hence, the cell wall may also be referred to as the cellulose cell wall because it comprises of that compound called cellulose. So, when it has been placed in distilled water, this cell is going to absorb water. Remember, the cell wall is fully permeable and it will allow water into the plant cell. As the water continues to move in, the cell becomes more rigid because it's absorbing more water, but it doesn't burst. It doesn't burst because the cell walls comprise of that compound called cellulose, which make them to be firm, to be rigid, so they cannot burst in case too much water is flowing in. The water may flow in until it can't flow anymore, until no more water can be absorbed in. That kind of cell is referred to as a turgid cell, while the pressure that is generated is called turgor pressure. Turgor pressure is therefore defined as the pressure that is generated by the vacuoles of a cell when the cell absorbs more water. This pressure is exerted towards the cell wall. That is from the vacuoles of the cell, specifically the tonoplast. From the tonoplast of that vacuole, pushing the cytoplasmic content towards the cell wall, and when that happens, it makes the cell to become rigid. The vacuole is increasing in size, the cytoplasmic content pushed towards the cell wall. Now there is the turgor pressure. On the other hand, we have another one called the wall pressure. As the plant cell continues to absorb more water and the vacuole continue to push the cytoplasmic content towards the cell wall also needs to provide some pressure, which is equal and opposite to that turgor pressure, so that the cell cannot burst. When that process happens, then the cell wall is going to generate some pressure which acts against the one that is originating from the inner side of the cell. We call it wall pressure. Wall pressure can therefore be defined as the pressure that is generated from the walls, and it is equal and opposite to the turgor pressure. So it is equal and opposite in sense that it is acting against turgor pressure. So the turgor pressure is trying to push the contents of the cytoplasm away from it towards the walls, while the wall pressure is now pushing those contents towards the vacuole so that it remains firm, but there is no bursting in this process because the cell wall is rigid enough. I'm going to explain it using a certain PowerPoint here. I want us to look at this PowerPoint so that we can be able to understand the difference between turgor pressure and wall pressure and how they are generated. Let's look at this now. Turgor pressure. Turgor pressure is the kind of pressure that is generated in a turgid cell. A turgid cell is characterized by the cell walls which have bulged outwards as shown using these red marks over here. As the plant cell absorbs more water, the water gets into the sap vacuole. This makes the sap vacuole to swell and increase in size, making it to push the cytoplasmic contents towards the cell wall. That pressure that is generated when the tonoplast is pushing towards the cell wall is called turgor pressure. Therefore, we can define turgor pressure as the pressure that is exerted by the tonoplast towards the cell wall as the plant cell continue to absorb water through the process of osmosis. Wall pressure. This is the pressure that is generated by the walls of a turgid cell, and it acts against turgor pressure. That means that this pressure is pushing the cytoplasmic contents towards the sap vacuole. It is very important because it prevents the cell from bursting. This is because the cell wall comprises of an important compound called cellulose, which makes it firm and rigid, hence capable of counteracting the effect of turgor pressure. Remember, turgor pressure is pushing from the tonoplast towards the cell wall, while the wall pressure is pushing the cytoplasmic contents towards the vacuole. Therefore, we say that wall pressure is the pressure that is equal and opposite to turgor pressure, and it is exerted by the cell wall towards the tonoplast as the cell absorbs water through the process of osmosis.